Apparently, community safety now means breaking into my cabin and changing the locks while I'm gone. Because nothing says protection like unauthorized entry and passive-aggressive notes taped to your door. We've upgraded your lock for your protection. It read like some twisted HOA version of a ransom letter. For my protection? Please. That's like someone slashing your tires and handing you a bus schedule. It was like waking up and realizing someone repoed your peace of mind, packed it into their Subaru, and drove off humming the HOA bylaws. The new president, Brenda Whitfield, had gone full clipboard Karen. She strutted around like she was auditioning for CSI Landscaping Unit, snapping photos of people's hedges like she was building an evidence board for lawn crimes. You ever had a neighbor so nosy they gaslight your pine cones? That's what we're dealing with. But first, leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. My name's Devin Collins, and until recently, my life at Pine Lake Resort in Montana was exactly the retreat I'd worked my whole life to build. After 2 decades designing identical office parks and soul-sucking suburban developments in Seattle, I finally cashed out and bet on myself. I designed and built my dream cabin, off-grid, eco-friendly, perfectly nestled into the natural terrain. A place where the angles of the roof caught the sun just right and the windows framed the lake like moving art. This cabin wasn't just a home. It was my masterpiece, my sanctuary, my resume, and my refuge. I didn't build it to defend like a medieval castle. I built it to live in. And for a while, Pine Lake was the kind of place where neighbors nodded but didn't pry, and the HOA only stepped in when someone's dog turned a community flower bed into a bathroom. Then Brenda got elected president and everything went sideways. Brenda Whitfield, bleach blonde piled high like a monument to hairspray, floral tops loud enough to scare wildlife, and a voice that could pierce drywall, won the HOA election with a campaign about restoring values and preserving our natural beauty. Sounded good. Who doesn't love nature? But by her first meeting, she had introduced a 3-ring binder thick enough to stop a bullet, filled with emergency safety regulations that gave her the right to inspect everyone's property for wildfire hazards. Suddenly, ladder placements, window tints, and the number of garden gnomes became violations. These are non-negotiables, she announced, like a dictator reading off a list of new taxes. Walter Bennett, our former HOA president, a silver-hued man with the calm dignity of a retired judge, leaned toward me and whispered, "This isn't about fire prevention. Watch what happens next." And boy, was he right. Brenda didn't care about safety, she cared about control. Her eyes scanned properties like a real estate terminator, calculating who to target next. It started small. A notice about my exterior paint color being a half shade too dark. Never mind that it had been approved 2 years ago. Then came a fine about my deck furniture being non-compliant. The chairs were wood. So was the deck. Apparently, they clashed in tone. My favorite was the violation for excessive pine cones. Brenda was walking around like nature itself had broken the rules. Meanwhile, Margaret, a retired school teacher down the road, got hit with thousands in fines for having unapproved deck chairs, ones she'd bought at the community fundraiser, no less. Within weeks, a for sale sign appeared on her property. Just like that, her sanctuary was gone. It was like watching a slow-motion eviction executed with polite letters and passive-aggressive citations. They fined me for the color of my cabin's soul, and I paid quietly, thinking maybe it would stop. Spoiler, it didn't. Then came the knock on my door. Walter again. Same calm eyes, but this time with an edge of urgency. "Devin," he said, stepping inside without pleasantries, "that cabin next to yours? The one that burned last month? That wasn't an accident." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. He shook his head. "I don't have proof, but I've lived here long enough to know when something's not right, and Brenda's circling your place like a hawk." Just then, my phone buzzed. New email from the HOA. Mandatory fire safety inspection 2 p.m. tomorrow. Walter's face darkened. "Don't let them in," he warned. "Whatever you do, check your locks carefully." That was the moment, the exact second I stopped being nice and started planning to turn Pine Lake's HOA into the most well-documented downfall since Tiger King. The morning after Walter's warning, I sat at my kitchen counter with three things: a strong cup of coffee, the HOA bylaws, and the Montana State Legal Code. Within 10 minutes, I was angrier than I'd been when I got fined for pine cones. Turns out Brenda had about as much legal authority as a crossing guard at Area 51. According to both state law and our own HOA's dusty charter, no inspection, fire or otherwise, could be conducted inside someone's home without explicit permission or a verified emergency. And no, I don't like your solar lights didn't qualify as imminent danger. Brenda wasn't enforcing safety. She was playing Monopoly with real property laws, except every space was boardwalk and she already owned the bank. It was like reading fan fiction written by someone who thought power trip was a personality trait. I started taking notes, screenshots, and photos, documenting every word of law she'd chosen to ignore, every line she'd crossed like it was a hiking trail to a lawsuit. And just as I was finishing up my legal battle plan, fate handed me my best weapon. Harper Mitchell. Harper lived 3 cabins down. Most folks just knew her as the quiet one who grew heirloom tomatoes and listened to jazz. What most didn't know was that Harper also worked in the county DA's office, specifically as a prosecutor. When I called and explained the Brenda situation, she didn't hesitate. "Devin, I've been waiting for this call," she said, her voice calm but laced with something cold. "You're not paranoid. You're just the first one smart enough to document what's happening." I filled her in on the notices, the bogus violations, and the fire inspection that felt more like a trap than a precaution. "You're not alone," she told me. "I've had others come to me quietly. Brenda's got a pattern, and I've been watching it build. Now we've got your case to anchor it. She offered to help me from the inside, quietly, legally, and with purpose. That call turned the tide. I wasn't just a guy with a weird HOA problem anymore. I had a witness list, a co-counsel, and a mission. That night, instead of drafting cabin designs, I designed my own surveillance system like I was prepping for a homegrown heist movie. By the time I was done, my cabin had more eyes than a poker table in Vegas. I started with a decoy, one big, obvious camera mounted near my door, aimed just off-center, like a baited hook. Then I installed the real system, birdhouses wired with hidden lenses, motion sensors buried in flower pots, microphones in wind chimes, and night vision tucked into my solar fixtures. The crown jewel, a thermal detection unit near the utility box that triggered instant alerts if anyone got too close. Everything was backed up to a secure cloud server with automatic remote forwarding to Harper's inbox. I didn't just want footage. I wanted a fail-safe record that no electrical fire excuse could erase. My cabin was still a sanctuary, but now it was also a quiet, relentless machine of accountability. Like hiding eyes in the trees. Let them come. I was ready. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd upgraded. 3 days later, an emergency HOA meeting was called, with less notice than a surprise birthday party hosted by your enemies. 12 people showed up. 8 of them Brenda's close friends and permanent nodders. On the agenda, a new bylaw banning any unauthorized surveillance devices, citing privacy concerns. Brenda stood at the front, floral blouse blazing like a war flag, clutching a clipboard with the smugness of someone who thinks power is the same as truth. "We've had troubling reports of homeowners installing intrusive cameras," she said, eyes locked on me like I'd installed a missile launcher on my deck. "It's a violation of neighborly trust." Oh, the irony. The same woman who'd been creeping around cabins with a measuring tape like it was a wand of justice now wanted us to believe she cared about boundaries. The vote passed 7-5. I didn't even flinch, because while they thought they'd won, all they'd done was confirm my suspicions and given me another clip for my growing highlight reel. After the meeting, Brenda sauntered up to me like we were co-stars in some community soap opera. Her perfume hit me first, cheap, aggressive, and cloying. Then came the whisper, "Time to sell, Collins. You don't belong here anymore." I smiled like someone who'd just watched a villain trip over their own cape. "I appreciate your concern, Brenda," I said, But I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I've never been more invested. She narrowed her eyes, waiting for a punchline. From now on, I'll be documenting everything that happens near my property, for safety. Her nostrils flared, her heels clicked away. That was when I knew I'd flipped the dynamic. Brenda was no longer a threat, she was a subject. And I didn't just install cameras, I installed a story trap. One that would record her downfall in high definition, one petty violation at a time. If you've ever been bullied by someone hiding behind a rulebook they barely understand, then you know what I felt in that moment. That quiet, powerful certainty that they messed with the wrong cabin. So let me ask you, what would you do if someone tried to weaponize community standards to break into your life? Comment if you've ever turned the tables on a power-hungry neighbor. Because this wasn't just surveillance, this was justice, powered by Wi-Fi and fueled by petty revenge. And Brenda? She'd just walked into the lens. The lock was changed while I was at a client meeting an hour away, pitching sustainable cabins to people who actually believed in building with nature, not policing it. My phone started lighting up just as I was wrapping up. Motion detected at the front door, unauthorized access, lock tampering. I stepped away and checked the footage. There she was. Brenda in full HOA regalia, clipboard in one hand, a smug grin in the other. Beside her, a locksmith. She was telling him I'd approved an emergency lock change due to immediate safety concerns? The locksmith hesitated, asked for proof. Brenda waved a printed email, which I instantly recognized because I'd written the real one declining the inspection. It was doctored, my words twisted to suit her game. The locksmith, clearly unsure but pressured, proceeded anyway. She left another note, taped neatly to the door. Fire safety inspection completed. Contact HOA for new key. Like HOA Santa Claus if Santa broke into your house and left you a bill instead of gifts. The footage, high def and time-stamped, was already en route to Harper and, more importantly, Sheriff Lucas Reed. Sheriff Reed didn't waste time. He'd been briefed by Harper, and when I called, I barely got the words out before he said, "I'm already watching it, Devin. Don't go in alone." When I pulled into my driveway, Brenda was still on the porch, like she owned the deed, swinging the new keys like a prize from a carnival booth. She smiled, fake as a $3 bill, and launched into her script. "Devin, we found serious hazards. We had to act." I kept my expression steady, remembering the sheriff's words, "Let her perform." Moments later, the sheriff's cruiser rolled in, the crunch of tires on gravel cutting through her speech like a gavel. Brenda turned, switching from smug to sweet. "Sheriff, how lovely to see you." Reed wasn't buying it. He nodded, silent, pulled out his tablet and started taking notes. "Why don't you walk us through these violations?" he said calmly. The stakes had officially changed. She thought she'd written the playbook, but now the script belonged to us. Brenda led us into my cabin like she was giving a home tour on a real estate show that only aired in purgatory. "You'll see the wiring over here is exposed," she said, pointing at a lamp cord tucked behind a shelf, exactly where it had been for 2 years. "And there's flammable material dangerously close to heat sources," she continued, gesturing to a bag of kindling that hadn't moved since winter. Then she paused at the kitchen, frowning. "We didn't notice this earlier," she said, pretending to discover a small plastic container near the toaster. Inside was a slosh of clear liquid. My eyebrows rose. That hadn't been there this morning. Her lies were stacking like kindling, ready to light. And I wasn't the only one watching. Reed was filming. "Interesting," he said, deadpan. "And you found all of this after changing the lock without consent?" Brenda blanched for a second, then rallied. "It was an emergency. He didn't respond to the inspection request." I kept quiet. The silence stretched, then cracked under the weight of her fabrication. We stepped back outside just in time for the cavalry to arrive. 5 HOA board members, summoned by Brenda like backup dancers for her final number. I could tell they expected to be briefed on some heroic act of fire prevention. Instead, I invited them into my living room. "I think we should all watch this together," I said, firing up my laptop and casting the footage onto my TV. First, the lock change, Brenda lying, the locksmith's hesitation, her smug commentary, then the entry. Her rummaging through my drawers, placing the container behind the toaster, taking photos with angles that clearly suggested pre-planned framing. The room went silent. You could have heard a pine needle drop. One board member looked like he'd seen a ghost. Another actually stepped back from her like guilt was contagious. "Brenda, what the hell is this?" one muttered. She stammered, hands fluttering like her blouse might suddenly grant her an escape route. "This is taken out of context. He's editing footage to make it look bad." Reed calmly turned his tablet around and played the same clips from his feed. "This isn't edited," he said, "and we're just getting started." The sheriff stepped forward and held up the plastic container with gloved hands. "This appears to be camping fuel, highly flammable, and it was deliberately placed next to an active outlet. That's not a safety hazard, that's attempted arson." Brenda's jaw unhinged. "You have no right to accuse me of—" But before she could finish, Reed snapped on a pair of cuffs, like he'd been waiting all week. "You're under arrest for illegal entry, property tampering, and attempted arson. You have the right to remain silent." Her voice pitched up as she screamed about being set up, her mascara streaking under the heat of her own lies. One board member walked out. Another turned to me and quietly said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." But I knew. I'd known for weeks. Because I didn't just install cameras, I set a trap. And today, it snapped shut. If you've ever had someone weaponize authority to steal your peace, let me tell you, justice hits different when it's caught on video. This wasn't about wires or walls or even cabin doors. It was about people like Brenda thinking they could control a place by breaking its spirit. So tell me, have you ever caught someone in the act red-handed and watched the lie collapse in real time? Drop your story in the comments, because sometimes the best security system isn't just the cameras, it's knowing you're not the only one who's had enough. Word of Brenda's arrest spread faster than a summer wildfire with a tailwind. By sunrise, the whole of Pine Lake was buzzing like a wasp nest someone had poked with a regulation-compliant stick. Neighbors who'd once kept to themselves now wandered up my driveway with stories of their own. Violation notices for imaginary offenses, strange visits from Brenda at odd hours. One man, George, said she cited him for improper gravel alignment on his path to the mailbox. But the real heartbreaker was Margaret. She came back. The retired teacher who'd been forced to sell her home because of structural hazards Brenda claimed were too expensive to repair. Margaret stood in front of the house she once loved, tears in her eyes and a stack of inspection records in her hand, all clean before Brenda got involved. "Turns out structural damage disappears when a shell company buys it at half price," she said with a wry smile. I told her what I'd seen, what I'd filmed. She just nodded and said, "I knew it. I just didn't think I could prove it." But we had proof now. And Pine Lake? Pine Lake was finally listening. Harper had already been digging like a hound with a scent, but now she had public backing and blood in the water. She dropped by with a folder thick enough to slam a door shut on. Inside, Brenda's employment history, real estate transfers, and, most importantly, her consulting contract with a development firm called Pinnacle Group. "This is where it gets interesting," Harper said, laying it all out. Pinnacle had a pattern. Buy out struggling communities, use inside connections to squeeze homeowners, force sales, then bulldoze and build luxury resorts. Brenda wasn't the queen bee we thought. She was just a pawn in a rich man's game. In fact, she'd pulled the same play in 2 other communities. Both had accidental fires. Both had board members who disappeared quietly with fat retirement packages. One HOA president even moved to Belize. "They're orchestrating it like clockwork," Harper muttered with enough distance to deny everything. But this time they'd underestimated 2 things: the stubbornness of a guy who loves his cabin and the lens of a camera that doesn't lie. 2 of the board members who'd supported Brenda vanished overnight. One left a note on their mailbox saying they'd decided to spend more time with family. The other? Just gone. Cabin cleared out like it had been professionally scrubbed. What Harper found next confirmed our suspicions. Both had received wire transfers from LLCs connected to Pinnacle, with dates lining up to crucial votes, like the one where they banned surveillance. They smiled at the potluck, Walter said bitterly, and sold our peace behind closed doors. We all felt it. The violation wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. These were the people we'd shared firewood and 4th of July with, and now we knew they were quietly packaging our home, our land, our lives into bullet points for a corporate brochure. But we weren't going down like the last 2 towns. Not this time. The very next day we formed the Pine Lake Security Committee. I was nominated, voluntold, to lead the tech side. 1 week ago I was just the quiet guy designing cabins with passive solar heating. Now, I was the guy wiring motion sensors into mailboxes and giving crash courses in security software like Batman in cargo shorts. I installed basic systems in 15 cabins within 4 days. Harper drafted legal templates for cease and desist letter. Walter turned the community pavilion into a coordination hub, complete with coffee, laminated maps, and hand-labeled walkie-talkies. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were building a firewall. And not the kind Brenda could violate with a printed-out PDF and a pink highlighter. The mood shifted. People started talking again, sharing meals, checking in. Trust, once shattered, started to stitch itself back together. 1 camera, 1 cup of coffee, 1 neighbor at a time. But just when I thought we'd turned the corner, I got a ping on my security system that chilled me more than any of Brenda's stunts. A foreign signal was detected in my electrical panel. Something broadcasting quietly, intermittently. I opened the box, and there it was. A tiny black transmitter, no bigger than an AA battery, wedged behind a circuit breaker. It wasn't something you picked up at Radio Shack. It was military grade. A bug. Professional. Someone had planted it to monitor my system from the inside. I called Sheriff Reed immediately. He came over, gloves on, evidence bag ready. 1 look and he whistled low. "This isn't OA drama anymore," he said. "This is corporate surveillance." We stared at it together. That little blinking light carried the weight of a whole new threat. Brenda might have been the face of the chaos, but she wasn't the brain. She was the bait, and the real predator was just getting started. If you ever thought HOA drama was just about mailbox height and lawn color, think again, because sometimes it's not a power trip, it's a hostile takeover in khakis. Let me ask you, have you ever discovered a snake hiding under your welcome mat, only to realize it was wearing a name tag and carrying a clipboard? Drop a comment if you've seen something in your neighborhood that didn't sit right, because once the cameras catch the pawns, it's time to start hunting the players. And trust me, we were just getting warmed up. 3 days after we found the surveillance bug, they sent him. Richard Carryle. Polished shoes, slicked back hair, and a smile so artificial it should have come with a plastic label. He stepped out of a luxury SUV at the Pine Lake entrance, clutching a briefcase that practically screamed settlement offer inside. Sheriff Reed and Harper flanked me as we greeted him on the porch. "Mr. Collins," he began, like he was about to offer me a vacation timeshare instead of hush money. "Pinnacle regrets the unfortunate events involving Ms. Whitfield. We want to make this right." He opened the case to reveal a folder, standard legal speak, thick with non-disclosure clauses. "We're prepared to offer substantial compensation for your distress." He smiled like a dentist offering candy laced with Novocaine. But what he didn't realize was that my pain wasn't for sale, and neither was my silence. Before I could respond, Sheriff Reed stepped forward, voice low but firm. "That offer you just made? It sure sounded like a threat to a cooperating witness in an ongoing investigation." The lawyer blinked, shuffled the papers, cleared his throat. "Of course not. Pinnacle merely wishes to avoid further disruption." That's when Harper pulled her own folder from her bag. Thicker, heavier, hotter. "Disruption's coming," she said, "and it's wearing a badge." Turns out, Harper had already been in contact with the state attorney general's office. What started as a local drama had now spilled across county lines. State lines, even. The AG had opened a formal investigation into Pinnacle Development Group for multi-state racketeering, property fraud, and conspiracy to commit arson. Apparently, Pine Lake was just one dot in a pattern of calculated acquisitions through intimidation, false violations, and conveniently timed disasters. They've done this in Oregon, Idaho, Colorado, Harper said. Same script, same shell companies, same endgame, clear out communities, pave paradise, sell luxury. That folder she showed Cariel? It included transaction records, suspicious wire transfers, and copies of Brenda's private communication with Pinnacle's mid-level execs. Suddenly, the legal smirk slipped off his face like bad wallpaper in a humid cabin. Harper leaned in and added, "You picked the wrong mountain this time." The community felt it too, the shift. It was like someone had flipped a breaker inside Pine Lake. People started organizing daily patrols, not out of fear but out of solidarity. We created a shared signal system. If one cabin's alarm went off, neighbors were there in under 2 minutes. Harper and Walter coordinated a weekly truth and tea gathering at the community pavilion where people brought stories, documents, and casseroles. We went from suspicious to soup sharing in 1 week. Even George the gravel path guy volunteered to build a wooden post system around the lake for emergency radios. I spent my days installing and syncing basic security setups in every cabin that wanted one. Some people paid in cash, some in cookies, and one guy in an old fishing rod I still use. At night, when I sat on my porch, I didn't feel alone anymore. I didn't feel like I had to check every shadow, because I knew someone else had already checked it for me. Then Walter floated the idea that would turn our defense into permanence. What if we protect the land itself? He asked, pointing to the forested ridge above the lake. Not just with cameras and locks, but legally permanently? The idea was a conservation easement, a partnership with a regional land trust that would lock the land's use in place forever. No resorts, no strip malls, no corporate bulldozers. Like locking the door with laws instead of keys, Harper explained. I sketched out plans for walking trails, community gardens, and solar-lit pavilions that wouldn't just preserve the beauty of Pine Lake, they'd enhance it. It wasn't just about keeping Pinnacle out. It was about making sure no one could do what Brenda did again. Ever. The more we talked, the more the idea caught fire. Within days, the security committee became the conservation committee. Neighbors who once barely waved were now voting on trail names and wildlife signage. We weren't just fighting anymore, we were building something we could be proud of. And then, like clockwork, they tried again. A new car, different make, same vibe, pulled up to the Pine Lake entrance one foggy morning. Black SUV, corporate logo on the side, Evergreen Capital Partners, a quick internet search confirmed it, another shell firm with ties to Pinnacle, known for acquiring distressed properties. But this time they didn't sneak in. As soon as the vehicle crossed the perimeter, the resort-wide alert system triggered. Phones buzzed, radios crackled. Within 5 minutes, 15 neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder at the entrance, arms folded, calm but unmovable. Walter was at the front, flanked by Harper and myself. The SUV idled for a moment, then slowly reversed, tires crunching gravel as it turned and drove away. No one said a word. We didn't need to. The message had already been sent. Pine Lake wasn't for sale, not anymore. If you've ever felt powerless in the face of suits and paperwork, I'm telling you, there's power in people. There's power in knowing your neighbor's name, in standing up when they try to scare you into silence. So tell me, have you ever watched a community wake up and roar back? Drop a comment if your neighborhood ever turned the tables. Because HOA didn't know we'd become a fortress, and next time they try to come through the gates, they're not just facing one homeowner, they're facing all of us. We gathered at the lakeside pavilion under a sky so clear it looked freshly scrubbed, like nature itself had RSVP'd to what was about to happen. Walter stood at the podium, a folding table with a microphone clipped to a lantern, and read through the proposed bylaw reforms. One by one we voted, no more secret meetings, no fines without documentation, no inspections without consent. Each vote passed unanimously. We retired the HOA's old rules, set them on fire, metaphorically, though George joked about bringing actual matches. When the vote ended, Walter paused, voice thick with emotion, and said, "Today we don't just fix what was broken, We prevent it from ever breaking like that again." Margaret, standing beside me, squeezed my arm and whispered, "They told me my house was falling apart. Turns out it just needed the right people around it." Her challenge to reclaim her home had succeeded. With Harper's help, the sale was voided due to fraud. She was back, legally and proudly, and as she stepped up to sign the new charter as a homeowner again, the crowd erupted like it was the 4th of July. But this time, the only thing exploding was relief. I didn't set out to be anyone's leader. I was an architect, a quiet one at that, more comfortable drawing floor plans than leading a neighborhood. But suddenly I found myself designing more than homes. I was designing systems for safety, for energy independence, for resilience. I'd sketched cabin layouts, now I was sketching community evacuation maps, shared solar networks, water catchment systems, even a floating pavilion for lake gathering. It was like everything I loved about architecture, harmony, structure, sustainability was finally being applied to something that mattered on a deeper level, from designing cabins to designing community resilience. And the best part? I wasn't doing it alone. Every build had volunteers. Every design sparked collaboration. We were using the same tools the developers wanted to exploit: plans, permits, paperwork, but turning them into shields instead of spears. Brenda, meanwhile, had finally run out of binder pages to hide behind. In custody, facing multiple felony charges, she tried to cut a deal, offered up names, emails, internal docs from Pinnacle in exchange for leniency. And yes, she gave us plenty. Enough to strengthen the AG's multi-state case and implicate at least 2 executives. But, as Harper said during one of our legal debriefs, you can't unburn trust. You can only rebuild. Brenda would still serve time, just not as much as we hoped. But her legacy in Pine Lake wouldn't be fire or fraud. It would be the reason we got smarter, the reason we stood up. Her face no longer sparked fear, it sparked resolve. No one talked about her HOA presidency anymore. We talked about the committees we'd built, the people we'd protected, the land we'd saved. She tried to erase our homes. Instead, she sharpened our backbone. About a week later, Evergreen Capital tried again. Same SUV, different guy. Clean-shaven, muted suit, clipboard. This time, they didn't even make it to the gate. The second his tires hit the perimeter, the alert system triggered. Phones pinged, radios crackled. By the time his tires stopped, we'd already assembled 20 residents at the front path. I recognized the guy immediately. He'd been in a Pinnacle promotional video I watched during our research phase, but he didn't recognize the community that stood in front of him now. Walter held a clipboard, too. Ours, and calmly handed him a packet outlining our conservation easement, local trespass laws, and the new HOA's requirement for all external developer meetings to be public. "We don't do sales pitches," Walter said, deadpan. "We do security drills." The man looked around, then backed away slowly like someone who realized too late he was in the wrong part of town. As his SUV pulled away, George called out, "Next time, bring cookies, not contracts." That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the lake shimmer in the moonlight. For the first time in months, I wasn't scanning the shadows or checking motion alerts. My cabin felt like mine again. Not a fortress, but a home. I thought about everything we'd been through. The cameras, the break-ins, the bug, the arrest, and how somehow it had led us here. We didn't just stop the storm, we planted trees in its wake. And that made all the difference. So I'll ask you, if your HOA ever declared war on your pine cones, your paint, or your peace, what did you do? Did you fight back? Did you turn the porch light on and say, "Not today"? Share this with someone who's been there, who's felt that helpless heat of injustice and decided to do something about it. Because they didn't just wake a homeowner, they woke a community, and we're not going back to sleep. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next part.